I want to ask you, what is it about the human mind that example that you shared in your class when you cut them off? What is it in our brains that is this need to know what happens? This absolute, because you go on the ride, and a good story, a good movie, a good book will take you down this road. And if someone ruins the ending for, I mean, that's the worst. If you get a spoiler out, or you ruin the movie for them before they ever get to watch it, or ruin the book or anything like that, there is anger. There is like pure anger. What is it on a neuroscience level? What are the connections? What are the synapses in your mind that are connected? I mean, is this just programming over thousands and thousands of years, tens of thousands of years of telling stories around the campfire, where now we're just, if we don't hear the end of that story, we could die? Because that was the originally the story was like, there was a tiger who ate the child. And if you go around this corner, what corner are we to go around? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't tell you the corner. And now you're dead. So I don't know. Is that something? I'm just throwing that out there. What do you think?
Well, there's one theory which is a little bit experiment. It hasn't been confirmed yet, so we didn't actually put it in the book. But there's a theory of mirror neurons that Connie talked about. That this idea that when you watch somebody eat a chocolate pie, the very same neurons that are happening in their brain, if you like chocolate, are firing in yours, so you connect with it in that way.
Well, that's advertising. That's basically advertising.
Yeah. Right. And I, by the way, I make a great chocolate meringue pie, so and I have to pick that choice because it's important to me. But that's one theory, but it hasn't been confirmed. But the best argument that I've heard about, okay, why do we read stories? Why do we watch stories? It's because it's universal. You kind of look for what's the adaptation in evolution, because in evolution, in human existence, in any kind of life form, any activity takes energy, and you're going to have to eat or consume things in order to have enough energy to do that thing. And you don't want to waste energy. You could starve, okay? Or it's not efficient. If you could spend your time hunting rather than doing something else, you're wasting your time and you're reducing your chance for survival. Well, so stories must play some role in survival. And a good argument there's a book called The Storytelling Animal by Jonathan Gottschall. And his argument is this, that we mentioned in the book, it's that it's like learning. It's a way of learning about life without being in danger. That it's a rehearsal for life. And it is a learning thing. You like you just said, you tell a story about this tiger that's over there, and you don't tell people what's the lesson learned, then it's frustrating. And this process by which we become involved in the storytelling, there's other theories about that. It has to do with how we, in terms of connecting with main characters, let's say. Why do we give it art? Well, there's a process by which some would argue that morals in society are created, which is one theory is called blurring, that you'll blur and become another person. Like the example the theorist gave was this lady is thinking of killing her neighbor, okay? And then before she does it, she imagines what it would be like to be that neighbor. And then for a moment, she imagines the pain that she would cause by doing that. And then they blur, their identities blur, and then she decides as a result, I better not do it because I don't want them to feel the pain that I would feel. Okay, so that's a theory of how we connect with people. And that's deployed by storytellers when we tell a story. When we connect with a person on screen, we literally lose ourselves. I mean, I know you've had this experience.
Of course.
You're watching a movie. I've been in a movie theater where the power went out. Like, whoa, where am I? I'm in a movie theater. It's noon. I thought it was nighttime because the movie, you get lost in it.
It's very it is such a magical thing. It really, when it's a good story and a good movie or a good book, you're not there. You are in the story. You are. Right. Everything else just shuts down because we're literally sitting in a dark room for 2 hours, looking at some images flicker and some sound play. It's fairly a magical experience in the movie theater, but anyway.
Right, and there's this thing called the willing suspension of disbelief, that you're willing to do that. Okay, well, Gottschall argues that it's not willing. You can't help it. If I start telling a story, okay, there was this ship on the sea, and the sea salt was blowing, and the waves were coming in, and the clouds appeared on the horizon, and you're there already. You can't stop feeling those things and hearing and imagining what I'm telling you.
Is it the equivalent of saying, "Don't think of the pink elephant"?
It could be.
It's like basically, whatever you do, don't think of a pink elephant right now. And you can't stop it. Now everyone who's listening right now is thinking of a pink elephant. Even I told them, don't think about it. So when you were telling that story, I was already going in my head and connecting to the experiences of when I was on a boat, or when I was on and I could smell the ocean. I was already going real quick, and I wasn't even exerting any energy to do it.
Yeah, and it comes natural to us because it helps us. Another psychologist, I want to make sure I get the name, Keith Oatley, because I referenced this. He had an article called the Flight Simulator of Life, that stories are the equivalent of a flight simulator. For an airline pilot, you're on a flight simulator, so when you crash, you don't die. A movie, you become that other person in the movie, in the story, in the film, in the TV series, and they go through all kinds of danger and they learn lessons. And guess what? You got to learn the lesson that they learned, but you didn't have to die in the end. You got to learn it. So even a tragedy where the character doesn't survive, you learn something. You've learned, don't do that.
Now, isn't it interesting, because as of this recording, The Joker came out in theaters last week, and it is causing all sorts of commotion. People are walking out of the theater. People are loving the movie. It is a very divisive film. Right. Because, and I haven't seen it yet. I have my tickets because I have kids.
I haven't either, so
I want to see it too. But the thing, which I bring it up for this conversation, is that you are following a villain. You're watching a person go from being maybe a damaged human being into a full-blown villain, arguably a psychotic maniac, who is arguably one of the greatest villains ever created in the scope of movies and possibly in comic book lore as well. So people have a problem with that, because you're now attaching yourself to a villain in such a deep, dark way that it is bothering people. And I can't remember a movie. I mean, Taxi Driver would probably be the closest thing. Like when you watch Taxi Driver, there's a lot of people who just can't deal with it because you're Travis Bickle. I mean, you're with him.
Doing it.
You're in there. There is nothing else you can attach yourself to. And the filmmaker and the storyteller and the screenwriter, you're Travis, and you're going through it, and he's who he is. So people, that's why films like that have such a divisive feeling to it. And in today's world, you don't get those kind of films. So I'm excited to watch The Joker. I mean, it's put out by a studio.
That'll be very interesting. Usually, like, there have been successful movies, and one word I discourage my students from using that's popular is when they talk about the main character is hero. And I understand, like, the hero's journey, they don't necessarily mean hero, but when you say someone's a hero, you gotta the impression you get, the connotation is, someone who's heroic. They do heroic things, and they're strong, and they're attractive, and all that. But we don't learn from those kinds of people. We learn from people who got problems and that transgress, and they do the wrong thing. But you can have a character who's let's say a man who has an affair with a married woman and decides to murder her husband so he can get money, and we'll go with it because double indemnity, that works, but there is enough there for us to connect with. so that we're okay with going for the ride, even though it was controversial at the time.
Yeah.
And there was questions about, I mean, it couldn't get made for a long time. And there was this sense that people do learn from movies, and therefore we can't have bad people as main characters unless they're really punished. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but they wrote and shot an extra sequence in that movie that they cut out. And that extra sequence was, do you remember the film very clearly at all?
Not very clear. I saw it years ago, probably at film school.
Years ago. Okay. Well, the last scene is, spoiler alert, but it doesn't matter. It's still, he'll tell you anyway.
If it's over 50, 60 years old, it's not a spoiler alert anymore. It's on them.
Not a spoiler. Right. I can't get sued. It's a statute of limitations.
Exactly.
So this, what happens at the end is it's wrapped around with it begins with a flashback. It begins in the present, and the whole thing is a flashback with the guy narrating. And in the end, he stumbles and falls in the office, and that's where it ends. And he's with his buddy who suspected him and had to, ultimately turn him in. But that's where they ended it. But the next sequence that they didn't shoot involved Fred McMurray's execution. He goes to the electric chair.
Wow.
And it was an expensive, elaborate sequence. And Keyes, his best friend, is sitting in the audience, watching his best friend being put to death for his crime. And they realized it was a little too much. So they cut that out. But you could see how conscious they were, making sure that we don't connect with, we don't learn that it's okay to kill people from this movie. Another picture that I like to cite is one that's the main character committed statutory rape and is in jail for fighting, fist fighting, and people having assaults, and also he's a lazy bum and doesn't want to do any work. That's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's McMurphy.
What a great movie! Oh, what a great movie!
Yeah. But so you've got this flawed character in his own way. In the way his tragic flaw is a good thing. He has humanity. That's how the movies really twist things around. But our first impression of him is, and that's something called the primacy effect. First impression. The first time you see him, he's whooping it up for joy, and then he's going around trying to talk to people and helping them play cards. So your first impression is he's a good guy. And then you learn a little bit more about him, and then you find out what the kind of person he is, but his behavior is at odds with that. So I don't like students to censor themselves from having interesting, flawed characters. Now, the Joker I haven't seen. The reason for diverse opinions is something else that we talk a little bit about in the book. It just has to do with, of course, what we bring to movies, and we do bring our life experiences to them. We have, right, and so different movies are going to affect people in different ways. And I tell my students, when I pick movies that I show that I analyze, that it's I pick them for three reasons. One is I have to feel that they work, because I can't show you a movie how it works if I don't think it works. The second is it has to be rich in the craftsmanship, so I can point out different things the writer and the storytellers are doing that they can learn. And the third thing I tell them is the luck of the draw. I got to love it. And that's just me. And if they're out of luck, because the guy in the next room, he's going to show a different set of movies. And that just has to do with what resonates with me in particular. And there is a concept in constructivist psychology called the schema. A schema is a conceptual framework by which we understand the world. It's a shorthand way of understanding things. It kind of borders with object recognition, but it's like constructivist psychology, which plays a role in how we understand movies, and which I think if you understand that, you can have fun, is the premise of that. The argument is that our experience of the world, our experience of life, is not largely knowledge-based. It's based on inference, because our brains aren't powerful enough to process everything that we're seeing all around us.
No, of course.
Right. So an example would be if you see a curb on a street, a curb. The first time you're going to look at it, you're going to check it out when you're 2 or something, and you're going to navigate it. But once you store it, that's called bottom-up processing. You see it, it goes up in your brain. Then after that, it becomes top-down processing, where you see a curb, you compare it to their memory of how curbs work, and then you assume it's like any other curb, so you just walk over it. You don't measure it each time you walk over it. That wouldn't be efficient. So we have those shortcuts. And what happens is that sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes that curb isn't what we thought it was. It's a different curb, so we stumble, we fall. So when we'll get back to that in a second, how that plays a role in screenwriting. But in terms of how we perceive things, we do bring that top-down processing to the world because we've all had slightly different experiences. So that going back to Cuckoo's Nest, there's a scene in which Nurse Ratched, the first time she does this group therapy, and it's terrible. It's just everybody's at each other's throats, and she's sitting there impassively at the end, okay? And I stopped it there, and I asked my students, what do you think's going on with her? And I got different reactions. It was based on their perception. One said that she was a sadist, and she's happy that they fell apart. Another one said that she felt that this person had regret, that they weren't healthier. Another one was, there was a variety of these things. And no one's right. It's just they're bringing their stuff. So the Joker will be an interesting one to look at, what we identify with.